Welcome back, bienvenue and all that jazz. It's time to finally wrap up all of the books that I got to in the month of May. I know it's been a while, but I was defending and then doing graduation and just life things and just taking a little mini break from commitments and doing that kind of stuff. But now it is time to begin talking about all the things that I got to in the month of May. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into the statistics of the month, shall we? So in May, I managed to read 9 books, which totaled 5,467 pages. And a lot of these were immersion reads because that was really the only way I was getting my brain to focus in the month of May, just because there was a lot going on. And so I also listened to 59 and a half hours on audio, which is bonkers. And then I had an average star rating of 4.11. So overall, this was a pretty solid month. I really enjoyed the majority of the things that I read. I don't know that a lot of them or any of them really were like faves of all time, like new faves, but it was a solid reading month and I was doing well. And like I said, a lot of these were immersion read. So 7 of the 9 books I read in immersion, meaning that I had audiobook and ebook or physical book going. And they were pretty much all novels. There was 1 novella and then 1 DNF. So that is kind of the stat breakdown. So like usual, let's go through these in ascending star order. We'll start off with my DNF of the month, and that was the Trials of Ashmount by John Palladino. This is a indie self-pub book, and it sits firmly in its grim darkness of it all. So it's kind of hard to describe. It's kind of one of those epic adult fantasy books that starts really slow, and then the plot lines kind of come together pretty far into the book, I'd say, because I made it pretty far, like 40% in or something, before I just couldn't do it anymore. And I don't know if it's just the grimdark genre or this particular grimdark book, but a lot of the kind of character backstories were just kind of the like most grotesque, traumatic things that I have read in a book in quite some time. Like chucking a baby off a balcony, eating your mother after she was abused in inappropriate ways, like multiple times in front of your father, and then she was killed, cooked, and fed to you. Like, it was just like that kind of stuff, and it was just like over and over and over. And I don't necessarily shy away from dark content, but it felt dark just to be like the most awful dark thing that could ever happen. And I get that this is kind of giving the characters their impetus for whatever the overarching meta plot was going to be, but I never really saw the overarching meta plot, at least the chunk of the book that I read. And so there was really nothing giving me any sort of catharsis that I would want from having to tackle like content like that. And so it was unfortunately not for me. And I know my friends like Esme and Chris, they like love this book. So if you like really dark, messed up things, then I'd say definitely give the Trials of Ashmount a go. If you don't like any of the things that I mentioned, then maybe don't. But the straw that really broke the camel's back is we were finally getting to, there's this awesome school, Ashmount, and it has these trials to enter in, and it is like the magical school of the area. It's kind of set by a volcano, and there's this cool shield that protects it from the lava hitting it and like all of that kind of stuff. But then the like competition, I don't know. It just felt so melodramatic to me, and I just like was so taken out of any kind of investment in it. And then it was like the schoolyard bully thing that was like murderous schoolyard bully, which is a hard sell for me because I just don't buy it. What did he do that made you hate him so much? And then it was maybe about a girl. I don't know. Like, I don't want to get into spoilers, but I can't really spoil too much because I only read the first like 40%, but that was my DNF of the month. Then the next thing I'll talk about was Squeak by Vera Valentine. This is an Omegaverse adjacent fanficky type Omega, I don't even know, but there was balloon shifter animals, it was erotica. The characters and their backstories were surprisingly tragic and compelling. I read this for the start of the Scholars of Smut book club that we will be doing on a kind of quarterly basis. And so you can watch the first live show here on my channel, and I also did a full spoiler-filled reading vlog of Squeak, but it is as bonkers as it sounds. And it was just shocking to me that the consensus for all of us was that we actually kind of wished it was longer so it could more delve into some of the trauma that some of the main characters went through. It was obviously wild. There was funnel cake icing flavored spunk. There was balloon animal shifty bits that were red and or purple. And the balloon knot was the tip and like it was It was, yeah. So if you want more of my thoughts on Squeak, you can go to either of those places and look forward to the new Scholars of Smut book club continuing in the fall. I don't know that we've settled on what we're reading yet. I think we're going for some kind of Halloween monster thing. So stay tuned for that. Then we have my 3.75 star read of the month, and that was A Feast for Crows. This is book 4 in the larger Song of Ice and Fire series by Mr. Gurm himself. I have seen Game of Thrones from start to finish multiple times, so I know this world, these characters, the major plot moments fairly well, and I was surprised at how much of a slog it was for me to get through A Feast for Crows. Really very little happens, and there are some really cool, distinct things, particularly in the Dorne plotline, and some of the complexities about what was happening in Essos based on Dorne that I found really interesting. That being said, like, there was so many pages for so little payoff, and all of my favorite POVs, my Daenerys, my Tyrion, like, those were not present at all in this book, and it just felt like a very long epilogue to the events in Storm of Swords. And I don't know, it was just like, it wasn't bad. Like, I still obviously gave it 3.75 stars, but it was significantly slower than I was wanting it to be. And I did buddy read this with Jashana, and I think we kind of came to consensus on that. Like, this one was kind of a slog for both of us. And now we both only have A Dance with Dragons left because we have both seen the show multiple times and have been reading the books for the first time. And so there's only one more book. And then I'm actually fully caught up on A Song of Ice and Fire, which is wild, but we shall keep moseying right along. So up next, I'll talk about the first of 3 4-star reads, and that would be City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is book 1 in the Divine Cities, and I really didn't know much going into this book. It was chosen for me because it was part of the fabulous mug of mysteries, because people know that I really like the Gods Among Us trope, and there definitely was elements of that in this book, which were by far my favorite parts. And I really did enjoy the kind of mystery aspects of what happened, what is happening to the city, what is going on. There was like a murder mystery aspect. There were revelations about the world and the gods and how they function in this world. And it was all just really cool. I am nervous, however, because I have heard from some people that books 2 and 3 don't really live up to book 1. And that makes me sad, because book 1 was really good, but it wasn't like great. And so if books 2 and 3 are lesser, then they'll be good to bad. So we'll see. But City of Stairs was definitely a success, and I'm definitely interested in continuing on. It is only a trilogy, and these books are not particularly long. This first book was 466 pages, which for adult epic fantasy is on the shorter side. And so I'll definitely keep going and see what happens next. Then I also read The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. This is the follow-up book to Six Crimson Cranes. This is a young adult fantasy series where the first book, Six Crimson Cranes, is based on the Wild Swans, the Hans Christian Andersen tale, and it is a lot of fun. It's really steeped in cool Chinese folklore and mythology. And then The Dragon's Promise is a direct sequel following the same characters and having resolution to some of the events from book 1. And I think it was really fun. My major complaint is I was really excited to go see the Underwater Dragon Kingdom because I just love underwater settings. And so I was really excited that we started off the book that way, but then it was really only the first quarter to third of the book was set in that setting. And then we went on kind of a different adventure. And while I ultimately did have a lot of fun and was really satisfied with where this book ended up, and it made me really intrigued for the prequel, Her Radiant Curse, which is coming out, I wanted more from the Dragon Kingdom. But that aside, once I got over that, it just was a fun time. And so if you're looking for a fun, fast-paced, like Asian folklore-inspired twist on a classic European folktale, I think that you can't go wrong with trying Six Crimson Cranes, and it definitely reads on the mid to older end of YA, so it's not going to read super young, but it's also not like the angsty angst fest that would be something like a Sarah J. Maas or something more new adulty. So it is firmly in the YA lane, but it doesn't lean into some of those like canonically tropey YA angst fest that people kind of associate with the age range. So even if you don't usually read YA and anything about what I said sounds intriguing, I'd say still give it a shot because it is a lot of fun. Then I also continued my journey with the Chorus of Dragons series by Miss Jenn Lyons, and I read The Name of All Things, which is book 2. Is it book 2? It is book 2. And it was, so here's the thing. I really, really like the characters. I like the plots. I like the world. I like the magic. I like almost everything about the Chorus of Dragons, except for it uses this kind of framing device that kind of grates on me. And so in book 1 especially, we were kind of dealing with 3, potentially 4 timelines, depending on how you look at it. So technically each of these books is like a in-world text that there are annotations on from the person who kind of compiled said text. And so they will have corrections or little sarcastic quippy things and footnotes, which I actually found really entertaining. So that's kind of one timeline. We then also have the person kind of narrating the story. And there's like this more modern timeline where there's like this mind reading aspect, and so she is getting information from one of our main characters, and so there's that timeline. And then from there we go to a younger version of that character and an older version of that character, and every chapter hopscotches through those 2 different timelines. And I found that really irritating. I would have much rather just had the cohesive younger timeline and then the cohesive older timeline. That flashing back and forth on every single friggin' chapter kind of drove me nuts. The Name of All Things did something similar, where we were still having a character telling a story to other characters. This time we were in a tavern, trapped there because a dragon like froze us in, and so we're kind of catching each other up on what has happened. And then in both of the books, we kind of hit the main like timeline, current timeline, and like continue a main narrative from there. And I will say that I found the narrative device less distracting in book 2. It was still definitely there, but it didn't grate on me in the same way because it was 2 concurrent timelines from 2 different POVs centered around similar events. So you're kind of getting multiple perspectives on one cohesive story. And so I liked that much more than I enjoyed the hopscotch. And then I've started book 3, but I shan't talk about it yet. Or I haven't just started it, I finished it. So that's what happens when you film these damn wrap-ups so far after the fact. The next book I'll talk about is my 4.25 star read of the month. And that was The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafron. And this is book 1 in the Cemetery of Forgotten Books series. And this is, it's like historical fiction with fantastical elements and maybe kind of magical realism-y. I don't know. Trying to put that book in a genre box is interesting because it also has like some horror elements, and yeah, I don't know. Like, I actually really quite enjoyed this. I had seen Jashana talking about this at length. She did like a whole, I think, series review because she recently reread the first few books to finish off, I think it's a quartet, and she is like head over heels in love, like full book hangover status. And so I got FOMO and I wanted to know, and so she sent me the ebook of this so that I could check it out for myself, and I quite enjoyed it. It is very different for me because obviously I don't typically read like historical fiction, fantasy, whatever, but like the characters were super compelling. It is set in kind of 1920s, I don't even know, 1930s Cuba, I want to say. And so we are kind of following this one character and following a large chunk of his life and kind of his interactions with this Cemetery of Forgotten Books that his dad is kind of a part of this almost secret society for. And he picks a book to be its caretaker and things ensue. There's a lot of like drama around the author of the book that he chose. And we're just following all of these fascinating secrets and mysteries around this family and this author and what happened and what's going on in current day. It was very dramatic, very telenovela realness. So if you were looking for like a very dramatic, just like over the top, kind of almost melodramatic sometimes, but really compelling, like mystery, historical fiction, fantasy, horror, I don't even really know what to call it, you should definitely check out The Shadow of the Wind. Then I had 2 4.5 star reads this month. So the first one I'll talk about is The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. This is book 1 in the Rook and Rose trilogy, and this is actually really fun. So if you are looking for, maybe not as epic in scope, but you're looking for that kind of like Batman and Robin vibes. I read a lot of like mystery fantasy this month, I guess, because again, there's like this kind of murder mystery aspect going on, and we're kind of following the clues and finding a larger conspiracy and just like all of this like intrigue, and then there's cool like dream magic, and it was just really fun. And it read really fast, and I just really got sucked into it. I hope to read book 2 soon because I really want to continue, because I think book 3 is coming out in the fall. And I'd like to be ready for it because I think that this is a really great series that most people don't talk about, or it doesn't get the love it deserves. And so if you want like a fun mystery Batman Robin, but kind of in a Venetian setting with all the twisty, turny, political, backstabby goodness with dream magic and like all of it, highly recommend giving this a go. Then the next book I'll talk about, maybe I'll hold off. So before I talk about the next book, I'll talk about my reread of the month, which was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. And this was the great Cosmere-long book of the month. And our live show is coming up this weekend on Saturday, June 24th at noon Pacific time or 3 p.m. Eastern. And I just love Warbreaker. Just the characters, light song. Brandon Sanderson's humor actually kind of hits for me in this one because it's a little less like slapstick immature and a little bit more self-deprecating, and I vibe with that. The magic is so cool. Every person is born with this biochromatic breath that they can give to people, and that biochromatic breath gives you kind of this joie de vivre, if you will. Like, it lets you see colors more richly, it hears sounds more. But if you can compile more and more breaths, you can get to different thresholds of power where you get perfect pitch, where you can hear the exact notes of everything you hear, perfect like color vision, where you can discern the exact shades of things, and then you can actually use this breath to do what's called awakening, and you can put that breath into inanimate objects and give them commands. And so just all of that combined, and then it's like another kind of turn on zombies, because there are these gods in this world known as the Returned, which are these people that died and somehow came back. And so there's just a lot of really interesting things going on, and then there's this kind of conflict between the major power, which is ruled by this god king, one of these Returned, and then there is this kind of side country, which is the former ruling class that was displaced by this god king, and so there's tensions there, and it's just so good. So even if you don't normally like Sando, or you've been curious to try Sando, please read Warbreaker. And if you have read Warbreaker, please join us for the live show this weekend. And then finally, I'll talk about my favorite new book of the month. I think I'm making an exception this time. I would usually just give the highest numeric one because I gave Warbreaker 5 stars. And this book I only gave 4.5 stars, but maybe it's more like 4.75. I don't know. I haven't totally settled on a rating for this book, but I'm putting it as my favorite book of the month because I was just shocked at how much I liked it, and I expected to hate it. And that is The Blade Itself by freaking Joe Abercrombie. I read book 1 in the First Law trilogy. Who is she? But it was so good. So I know I'll be a broken record here and say the same things that everybody else says. The character work, phenomenal. Galacta's internal monologuing was like so weirdly relatable. The whole like I hate having a boss thing was just really funny, and I just loved it. And Galacta's like never ending disdain for stairs I so relate to, because if you don't know, I've had multiple surgeries on my ankle where like I've had ligament reconstructions, parts of my foot taken out, fused back together, all that stuff. And then my left knee I had an ACL replacement on, and it's actually been developing arthritis. And so I have really bad crepitus in my knee. When I go up the stairs, it makes like that Rice Krispie like popping noise. And so just like every single time he's like, oh, stairs, I'm just like, yes, Galacta, I feel you, because frequently me and stairs, not BFFs. But also, I know Angela is rolling her eyes and just like laughing because she told me so. But for some reason, it didn't stick in my brain that this was going to be like Dungeons and Dragons inspired. So feeling this kind of D&D vibey world with like a berserker, barbarian type dude, and then the like mysterious mage character, and just kind of all of that was really fun. And then obviously I'm so intrigued by Baez and everything that was happening in their plot line, and I hear that book 2, Before They Are Hanged, is, if I liked that plot line, I'm gonna love book 2, so fingers crossed for that. But I don't know, like something about the characters and the way the story was told, and like the idiot like princely guy who just cares about his stupid fencing lessons and like being beautiful, and just it was like dark but funny, and like the violence was done in a way where like it was never overly done. And I know people always say that The Blade Itself is all vibes, no plot. I would kind of push back on that a little bit, because I wouldn't say, when I hear vibes, I think kind of atmosphere, and I don't think that I would say that The Blade Itself is particularly atmospheric. It's kind of like generic medieval fantasy setting, D&D setting. What it shines on is the character work, and also we're looking at kind of a typical rebellion fomenting type plotline that you would normally see in an epic fantasy, but we're kind of removed from the plotline and looking at these like more cogs in the wheel, not the top echelon players in that conflict, and seeing how it kind of affects them and just kind of how the wheel turns regardless of like all of these individual people in it. And I don't know, like I didn't expect to like the Blade itself so much, but here we are. But that concludes it. Those are the 9, or I guess 8 books, 1 novella, and the 1 DNF I had in the month of May. If you just want to leave an emoji, I guess leave some kind of blade, sword, dagger, stabby thing for the blade itself, because shocking you, shocking me, I really liked it, and I'm really excited for book 2. But if you would like to just talk about some of these books, maybe you've read some of these, if you want to talk spoilers, just say spoilers and put a bunch of enters. Or if you want to tell me about your favorite book of May, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. But that will do it for today's video, so please like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more bookish shenanigans like this from moi. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!